Good morning, students. After talking about the background of literary criticism, we started with unit number 1 in yesterday's lecture. In yesterday's lecture, we talked about the relevance of classical criticism. We tried to understand how understanding of classical criticism is important in the study of literature. So by classical criticism, we mean the criticism or the a kind of deliberation by the Greek and Roman critics. In a discussion on the background or the development of literary criticism historically, we refer to the Greek critics like Plato and Aristotle. At the same time, we talked about Horace and Longinus. In yesterday's lecture, I told you how classical criticism helps us understand literature in a better manner. At the same time, how it is still relevant in the contemporary world as well. Then we talked about Plato and Aristotle's views. In this part of my lecture, I shall be talking about Aristotle and his poetics. So this is the picture of the Greek philosopher, literary critic, political thinker, and metaphysical thinker, analyst, and all. He is considered a scientist as well. That is of Aristotle. Aristotle lived in Athens, in Greece, during 384 BC to 322 BC. BC means before Christ. Okay, and he was an ancient Greek philosopher. Even he can be called a scientist who is still relevant even after almost, you can say, 2500 years. He is still considered one of the greatest thinkers in politics, psychology, and ethics. Ethics means the science which deals with moral behavior, etc., morality. When Aristotle was of age 17, he turned 17, he enrolled in Plato's academy. He became Plato's disciple. In the year 338, he began tutoring the great Alexander the Great. You might be knowing Alexander the Great was the Greek emperor, and Aristotle was his tutor. In 335 BC, I'm talking about, not AC, not after Christ, before Christ. So you might be knowing how the time is calculated or time is understood. So in 335, Aristotle founded his own school. The name of the school that he founded was the Lyceum, and it was founded in Athens. He spent most of his life, I can say rest of his life, studying, teaching, and writing in Athens. And his notable works include Nicomachean Ethics, Politics, Metaphysics, Poetics, and Prior Analytics. These are, of course, English translations. Originally, he wrote in Greek language. Now, when we talk about Aristotle's books, there is no exact number of books available, but he seems to have written 200 works. This is the estimated figure. This is not the authentic data. And these works are available in the form of notes and manuscripts. Manuscript drafts means not a rough writing. They are not available in the form of books. And these works cover reasoning, rhetoric, politics, ethics, science, and psychology. So he was a multifaceted, multi-dimensional personality. He was a philosopher, logician who dealt with reasoning. He was a rhetorician, means he taught us how to speak properly. He was a political thinker, and he was an ethician, means he talks about ethics. He talked about science, and he even talked about human mind, that is psychology. And these 200 works consist of dialogues, records of scientific observations, and systematic works. These, works were systematically kept, by his student Theophrastus. He looked after Aristotle's writing, and later he passed these works to his own student Nellius. Nellius is believed to have stored them in a vault. A vault is a kind of compartment, which is locked one, a cupboard, you can say, to protect them from moisture until they were taken to Rome and used by scholars there. These works were taken by Roman scholars and philosophy. Not just now, only 31 are in circulation. They are still in circulation, even after 2,500 years or so. And our focus of discussion would be poetics. Poetics is a scientific study of writing and poetry. In this work, Aristotle observes, analyzes, and defines mostly tragedy and epic poetry. Epic is a very long narrative poem. The Marathi word for epic is Mahakavya, like Mahabharata, etc. So most of the scriptures across the world are epics, in the form of epics. And John Milton's Paradise Lost is a very famous example of epics written recently. Recent in a sense, of course, for 400 years back. And compared to philosophy, of course, we are going to understand Aristotle's views regarding poetry, especially tragedy. Poetry, again, you should understand, stands for literature in general. In those days, poetry was the common word. Until 20th century, poetry was commonly used to refer to literature. Compared to philosophy, philosophy is the presentation of ideas. We have already understood that poetry is an imitative use of language. It is an imitation. Okay, and it is an imitative use of language, rhythm, and harmony that represents objects and events in the world. This was the stand of Aristotle. Aristotle defined poetry as an imitation of language, imitation by using language, rhythm, and harmony. And this is an imitation of objects and events in the real world. So his book explores the foundation of story making. Means we understand about character development, plot, and storyline because of Aristotle's poetics. So we are going to study chapter number 6 to 10 from poetics.